hello to everyone from Claire and me. We're going to just start by giving you a little bit of guidance on the assignment, particularly the poster, which is more imminent than the written piece. So let's just have a look at that. This PowerPoint is on the Moodle page. There is another very detailed set of slides also about it. It's an older one done by Leanne. Any dates on it won't be correct, but the detailed guidance, but it is fine, but it's very technical. It's about printing and such like, and to be honest, I don't know technically things, it's much too old. Let's have a look and see what it says. Right, you're going to take one focus for your poster from the module, okay? And relate this to relevant aspects of policy and practice. You have now some experience to draw upon in terms of practice, and it's fine to include information and evaluation from your first school experience. Okay? You must not, of course, let me make this really clear, name any schools, any teachers, any pupils. Okay? They must have pseudonyms if you're going to include them. Okay? And this next sentence is absolutely key. It is essential that your poster evidences a critically evaluative approach. Let's just explore that in a little more depth. Suppose, let's take the example of doing something on behaviour management. And in your school, on your first school experience, there was some sort of system, school-wide, of rewards and sanctions. How many people experienced that? I'm guessing almost everyone, in almost everyone's school. Now, I have seen schools, secondary schools, that have got things in place that pupils can gain so many credits a term, and if they gain enough, they can go to Alton Towers or somewhere in the summer. That's relatively common. Okay, it's fine to describe that to start with. But if you're looking at theoretical approaches, you need to bear in mind that that is very much a behaviourist approach to behaviour management. It's based around rewards and sanctions. The motivators are extrinsic, right? So you need to reference on your poster the relevant theory around behaviourist approaches to behaviour management. Okay? That will not be difficult to do. It will be in every textbook on teaching in the secondary school. There are also many texts on behaviour management. A very good one, if you are going to look at that, is by Louise Porter, called Behaviour in Schools. It's very good because it links theory to practice in each chapter very, very clearly. Okay, so you describe briefly what the system, this policy of behaviour management was. You link it to the relevant theory, and then you might want to evaluate it. Does it work for all pupils? 18 months or so ago, I was in schools as part of a research project that EPS as a subject area were doing with Year 9 pupils. And we were asking them about behaviour in schools. These were pupils identified as at risk of exclusion and or disaffected. And some pupils described similar systems to this. And one of them said, well, I'm not going to go to all two towers. I knew I wasn't by Christmas because I hadn't earned enough credits or whatever it was in the first term. Now, this isn't a very academic way of putting it. My view is the school shot itself in the foot with that pupil. What have you got then if you're using extrinsic motivators? What have you got to motivate them with? So, for some pupils, in other words, that may not work. And that's where you need to be evaluative in terms of what you're saying. Why might not it work for some pupils? What's the effect of that on pupils who might be already disaffected? And therefore, how appropriate is it as a tool for behaviour management? I'm not saying it's not an appropriate tool. You don't have to come to a yes-no type conclusion, but you need to discuss around the issues to do with that. You would also need to evidence that you recognise other approaches to behaviour management, ones that might be linked to planning and teaching and learning. In other words, the learning is so well planned and so motivating for pupils that you don't necessarily need an over-reliance on external motivators. You also would need to talk about and discuss relationships here, because they are key. And again, always coming back to references from reading. It is absolutely essential that just as if it was an essay, this poster is really well referenced, and you reference it in the same way as you would reference an essay, you know, with brackets and the source of information. So, that gives it that sense of criticality, critical evaluation. You've not just accepted what you've observed and practiced, but you're questioning it, and you're reading around it. And of course, you'll need a mark of 50% plus to pass this at master's level. And if those things, that sense of critical evaluation and reading are not there, then it actually can't pass at master's level. Now, I don't want to sound too frightening or anything, but you do need to make sure that all that is very, very clearly there. Okay, any questions so far on that? No. You, by the way, you also need a bibliography on your poster, just as you would in a written assignment. The poster must have a bibliography so that marking tutors can see what text you refer to. Again, if you're doing behaviour management, I'm just going back to the first sentence now. Relevant aspects of policy as well as practice. Well, check relevant government reports and guidance. If you were doing behaviour management, there should be some reference, for example, to the STEER report, which is the last report there has been on behaviour. There should also be reference, or it would be useful to reference, the Taylor report on alternative placements. I know you're not necessarily talking about alternative placements, but there is a lot there that is useful. So that way you have indicated that you have knowledge of government policy, reports and guidance. okay? Don't over-rely on government material, and don't feel that government material is somehow the tablets of stone. Okay, there's nothing to stop you querying what's in there in a balanced kind of way, all right? But it's no use just referencing via government guidance. You need that, but you do need this evidence, as I've said earlier, of a range of relevant reading. When you come with your poster, on whatever morning it is that you do to have it marked, excuse me, you'll be asked to complete a pro form. It's very simple, but it indicates the relative contributions of group members. It actually asks you to give a mark out of 10 for each of you. And that's a bit of self-assessment, really. The reason for that is that we don't usually, but we may differentiate the marks if we have some evidence to do so, right? Usually groups put 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. In other words, everybody's made an equal contribution, and that's fine. That means you will all get one group mark for it. But occasionally groups agree and do it 10, 10, 10, 7. Well, we may make a small adjustment with the marks if that is the case. And occasionally people come afterwards and say, well, actually, so-and-so didn't pull his or her weight. Well, I'm sorry it's too late to tell us. In other words, to be blunt, don't bother. If it's not on the pro forma, then we won't notice. Okay. And we have had, just the end of last semester, I know Claire had one case where this was second-year undergraduates doing a similar thing, where one member hadn't made a contribution. She agreed she hadn't. She was quite upset, but actually she didn't fail it or anything. There was just a differentiation in the marks. Okay? But unless you tell us otherwise, the mark will be the same. I've already said that about evidence of further reading and background research. Right, guidance on the actual presentation. There will be 2 marking tutors. I think it will include the people who teach UPS. I know Claire and I are, I think, available on the Tuesday mornings. What we will do is, you'll give us the poster, we'll give you the pro forma that I've just talked about, and ask you to go and sit right at the other side of Newman. No, not really, the other side of the room or something, okay? And fill that in while we look at the poster. We will start coming to some conclusions, but we may have some questions we want to ask you. So be prepared for that. Okay? Be prepared to answer them. If you look at the criteria for this, it may be possible that your poster doesn't meet all the criteria. We're not enormously worried about that. If it covers the ground from your focus aspect from the module, that is fine. All right? No problem. Okay, but we might say, for example, you've got a lot here about behaviourist approaches to managing pupil behaviour. What other approaches do you think might be useful? If you haven't indicated on the poster, and we would expect some sort of reasonable response to that. So that's the kind of thing that we might. Yes?
It might be worth saying that can elevate your mark.
Yes.
occasionally, you know, if you give us with an area that we're thinking, I'm not sure that you've evidenced that you know anything about it, if you give a good response to the question, that may, you know, come out to you.
Yes, and it certainly has done in the past. A poor response wouldn't necessarily lower the mark, it wouldn't raise it.
No.
Sometimes we comment, in fact, about the response to questioning, particularly if it's been very positive. I've already said about literature, I've already said bibliography. Yes, if you could please put names and student numbers on the poster. You'd be amazed how many times we get ones that look anonymous. That would be very useful because we have to have a sample of these posters for our external examiner. They will not change the marks. They're actually examining us as markers to check that we're in the right marking bands and so on. Obviously, we always are. Well, and finally, remember to be critical and reflective. That's the absolute key. That and the range of reading. And evidence experience from school practice, if appropriate. That's not absolutely necessary, but it's very useful. And it makes it useful for you because you're doing that link from theory to practice and showing that you understand it. And then just very briefly, some of the, taken from some of the learning outcomes from the module, an understanding of the changing nature of professional roles and relationships. Okay. I've already said that, and evidence of group collaboration, I've already talked about. Appropriateness of the poster for the intended audience. Take as the intended audience a group of teachers, a group of colleagues. I think that's probably the best way to look at that. And don't forget that the design of your poster, and there's loads on design on the other PowerPoint that's up there, but the design of your poster will have a bearing on the mark. You know, is it logical? Does it flow? Can the audience see straight away where to look for this or that aspect of what you've done? Sometimes posters that are totally covered in text, they might be great in terms of the research, and I'm not saying they fail or anything, because if the research is there, they wouldn't, and if the criticality is there, they wouldn't. But they may lose some marks in terms of the presentation, that's all. So just consider presentation. And then end up, yes. We know about that. So, any questions? Because now's your chance to ask. And there's three of us here who will do our very best to answer them. I take it if there's no... Oh, yes, yes.
So, roughly then, how many words?
I think it's 2,000 word equivalent. But the equivalence, don't over worry about. Don't count the words necessarily, in other words, because we won't. It's the appropriateness of it and the criticality of it that will count. We have to give an equivalent word count when we take a module and its assessment for validation, that's all. So really the word count signifies the amount of effort, if you like, of student effort. And it's worth, remember, 30% of your mark for an overall module mark. The essay is worth the other 70%. Just while we're on the subject of the essay, you can, if you wish to, develop some of the focus of the poster that you did for the essay if you wish to. You don't have to, but you can. Any other? Yes.
So we have 2 days to present the poster, aren't there? Does that mean everyone has to hand the poster in at one day and then come later on a different day? Or is it?
If you can, I'll sorting out the exact. Everybody will be given a date and a time of the poster, and that will be sorted out this week, so that you'll know plenty of time ahead. If I was in your situation right now, I would be preparing for the first of those dates, because anybody could be asked on the first of those dates. But hopefully by the end of this week you will know what group that you're going to be in, what day and what time of the day it will be. But prepare for the first of the dates.
Because I think the question was, if you're in the second week, should you hand in, would you require the poster in the first week? Because in one sense, of course, they get you an extra week. I can see the point of your question.
It's not something that we've done before in the past.
I don't know, because I haven't usually.
They are just prepared for the day that you come.
Very thanks to them. Yes?
Do we hand in the 5-minute commentary on the same day?
The what?
The commentary that goes with it.
Oh, forget the, yes. Forget the 500 words as such. Don't worry about it being 500 words. To be honest, just a very brief outline, and the pro forma will do it. So I really wouldn't worry about that. It's the poster that carries the mark. We're not going to worry about that. Yes. No, I think we talked about this, didn't we? Sorry. Don't worry about doing that. The pro forma will take care of that, because actually that's all the 500-word commentary was meant to be. And we found it works better with this pro forma, because you fill that in jointly. It's a cooperative effort, just like the poster. Yes?
You know how you said answering questions could increase the overall
Yes.
mark? Would that increase the whole group's mark?
If the whole group were knowledgeable, yes. I think it would be too difficult to pick out, because only one person can answer, by and large, the question, or one person gets first bite of the cherry. Yes, if we feel that the group's really knowledgeable, then it could up the mark. Yes?
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Obviously it's a group project, but is
Yeah.
it meant to be sort of like each person takes a section, or should the whole thing be done collaboratively?
Right. Well, almost inevitably, you will end up with each person researching one aspect to go on the poster. The danger, of course, as you'll be well aware, is that it can then become rather bitty and the poster doesn't flow. So I would suggest that you need to be very careful to meet well in advance to make sure that your contributions are then placed on the poster in a logical and clear way.
It's just because then if there's a particular bit that is then questioned, obviously that's the bit that you have to work more on.
Of course.
It's only you that's going to be able to
That's fine, it's not a problem.
Yeah, okay.
But sometimes it can be a bit obvious.
Sometimes it just looks like you've got, say, 4 people's assignments just to kind of poster, if you know what I mean, and it doesn't work. So you need to really be researching an area, obviously, because that spreads the workload. Then you want to bring the threads together. You know, you still want to look like you've introduced and set out what you're doing, some sorts of conclusions. There may be several sections of conclusions on each bit, but you know, you do need to get together. It won't work if you just do separate bits and then just stick them together and present that.
In terms of the critical evaluation, can I just make one observation of what works quite well sometimes with posters? And that's where there's some discussion around an aspect of your topic, and then it says critical reflection. or critical evaluation, that very much draws the marking tutor's eyes to it and makes it very clear that there is critical reflection and evaluation there. So you don't have to do that, but it's actually quite useful if you can. But not one huge chunk, and that the only chunk on the poster of critical reflection, but as the poster, as it were, develops the arguments or the discussions, that can be very useful. Anything else? Oh, yes.
Have you got any examples we can look at quickly?
I don't know.
We do have, I think we do. And it might, probably the best bet is...
Sample poster here.
I'm not probably, I think what we've done in the past is to... Oh, we've got some there.
We have got some on the Moodle page.
Oh, right, yes.
Not sure if they're any good or not.
They don't look like.
I can't make it move.
Oh, yeah. The answer is yes. On the Moodle page.
No, that's not the right thing, though, is it?
I don't. I'm not sure.
Those are equals.
They look like.
No,
So.
they're not the right thing.
I don't know how they've strayed. Sorry. I don't know how they've strayed up there.
No,
I actually think they probably came from Natalie, who's left, and used to run this module. But those are actually combined honours posters,
Yeah, so,
and I think we'll take them off.
yeah. So the only thing they're good for is to sort of look at a design, if you like,
Yes.
but don't look at the content. Does that really help you? This is the...
But if you've got some...
I'll look for what examples that we have got. If we've still got examples, we can bring them in so that you can have a look at them maybe next week at the end of whole school issues session.
Okay, anything else? No. Lovely. Well, good luck with doing it. We look forward to seeing them up to a point. No, okay.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes.
How long is the presentation last? Like, how long is it?
I think that slots are one usually every 15 minutes, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a maximum of 15 minutes. Yeah, so it won't go beyond that. In fact, it will probably be a little bit short because we've got to get them all in. So it's probably more like 10 minutes.
Okay, it's all right. That's fine. Okay then, thanks Judith, thanks Ray.